children playing, children gardening, people digging up their front yards and plowing them under, sort of plant farms and gardens. So then what happened? This part of the story I think a lot of people know actually already, which is in the post-war era we had industrial agriculture really came to its own, we had grocery stores really started taking over, the need to grow any of your own food diminished. One of the reasons that the small farm homes was really promoted were actually industrial businessmen really wanted to keep wages very low. So if someone was growing their own food and when they built their own house, they didn't need as high of wages. In the post-war era, there was much more of an industrial base. Wages came up, there was closer to utilization, which I'm not going to get into right now. But also just people. In the 1950s, somewhere around 190,000 people arrived in LA every year. So the idea of continuing to build half-acre, two-acre lots of land for everybody just wasn't really going to make sense. That being said, people really hung on to it. Like I was saying, the LA Unified School District continued to teach gardening classes. Gardening clubs continue to exist. If you look at planning documents from the 60s, particularly in this area in the San Fernando Valley, people are really saying we have to save agriculture, we have to save small farm homes, are an important part of what makes LA LA. And I really think it's important to look at sort of where they went and why. You can see traces of them all over the city-state. You can see the homes with the gardens. I was recently in South LA, and there are still these giant, giant fruit trees that haven't been decades old, and there's sort of these remnants all over the city that I think are really hinting at what's possible here. I think they're hinting at what people can bring back and what sort of a different type of city that LA can be in a lot of ways that other cities can't. So that's sort of the very quick version of the story, and I'm happy to answer questions. I'll say, how am I doing on time?
I 5 minutes of Lauren hasn't gone off.
Okay, so what I'll say is, what I do as an academic is what I sort of call vernacular history, because the history of LA is often told sort of the great homes, the great architecture, the great civic leaders, William Mulholland, those kind of things. And there are great books about all of those people and all of those things, but there's not a lot written yet about this kind of stuff, about average Americans moving to the city to become small farm owners. Small home farmers. Small farm owners. That's just not going to work out. There's a few things, and I've listed them on the back of the sheet. There's a few books that aren't about this topic, but cover them in sort of popular histories of LA. They have great bibliographies. They've already done some of the historical work, so if you get interested in this, I would definitely start there. The online archives are a lot of fun. What I sort of keep telling everybody when I'm kind of doing this presentation is, you start out looking for one thing. I was actually doing research on the New Deal, and you come across one thing, but that's really interesting. And that leads you down a whole other path. So I found these pictures of the homes in Almonte and kept backing up and discovered there's all these small farm homes. So in that sort of in the kind of sense of if you're interested in the general history. If you're interested in more specific things, there are a couple of places to start. One is the county assessor's office has terrifyingly accurate records about your property. And then there's just a little snippet of it, just because I'm obsessed with it. The Sanborn Fire Insurance Company used to do lot by lot hand-drawn maps of cities from like about 1860s to basically the 1970s. And most of your libraries will have one for your town, or if you live in LA, the LA Public Library has them. And I think at the LA Public Library you can access the online version, but I would actually really recommend going with the physical version because they're absolutely beautiful. But they're a great way of sort of seeing what the city looked like, and you can actually look at your plot of land. And I just have a little snippet of what this particular area, this block looked like. And they're kind of funky because they're really about, they were for fire insurance underwriters, so they're very preoccupied with what things are going to catch on fire. Which is great if you're looking for barns and stables and those kind of things. And open land is often agricultural. And then if you live in the city of Los Angeles, the other thing I just have to recommend is the the USC Digital Archive, which is free and online, has beautiful scanned copies of hand-drawn, hand-watercolored land use maps from LA from the 1930s. So you can go through and see exactly what each parcel of land in Los Angeles will be used for at the time. So those are a lot of fun. And then it's a little bit of a cliche, but consult your local library. They are full of these amazing things that you would not expect to find there. So like this kind of book that's being passed around, just the kinds of things that are in the library. So they have records about your town and about your neighborhood that often the librarians don't know about. They're very happy to help you find, but are not immediately obvious. And then Altadena has a great historical society, which has a huge collection of photos and maps and newspaper clippings. They're a great way. I mean, you have to remember, like, newspapers are published every day, and they have to fill the content, and agriculture just permeated Los Angeles at that time. You can see, like, the LA Times used to run an agricultural supplement every Sunday, which eventually becomes our garden supplement these days. And then the last thing I was going to say about all of it is the trick to all of this is figure out what keywords you're looking for when things are indexed. So, you know, I started out looking for homesteading. It turned out that small farm home is what I was looking for, and it took a few tries to kind of stumble across that. And sometimes it's just a little bit of luck and it's a lot of patience, but it's also just sort of keeping an open eye for things that you go to an archive and pull out a box, and there's something there you don't expect at all, and it leads you down these amazing paths. So the last thing I'll say, just in terms of if you really want to just become a total geek about this, and you're not going to just go home and make cheese, which I would probably recommend doing instead, is there are amazing, amazing collections of archives and libraries in the LA area. University of California, Los Angeles, they have one of the best reading rooms in the country. It's public, it's open, it's free. You just have to go and sign a piece of paper that says you won't destroy anything. USC has a very good one. There's a fee, but you can use it. So if you're curious, it's all out there. You just have to hunt for it. So I'll stop there and let you have questions or accusations. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about like how, because I think it's fascinating how 100 years ago or whatever, this whole movement was happening that's happening now, and then there's that sort of in-between place that did happen. Why do you think now there's a resurgence of the same types of things, same types of gardening and chicken raising?
Well, I'm going to totally steal Eric's line, but common sense. And particularly in Los Angeles, I think people started looking around going, really even in the last 15 years, I moved here about a decade ago, and people were like, the city's broken, the city's dirty, people are poor, it's congested, we spend all our time in traffic, we've got to do something else. And I think people, instead of immediately going, let's level the whole thing and start over, there was this like, well, what's sort of been here before? And what, I'm in a geography where I'm obsessed with sort of the geographic landscape. And sort of, this is a place that really lends itself to this kind of agriculture. It lends itself to small, single-family ranch homes that you can garden and grow your own food. So there's that part of it. The city's already built for it in a certain way. It's also, I think climate change has become a serious debate. The food movement has really gone national and global at this point. And I think once those ideas sort of percolate into people's minds, we start looking around our yards and our neighborhoods and saying, all right, so now what? What can we do at this level?
I know that the county had a farm that was worked by the, excuse me, county had a farm that was worked by the patients at Rancho Los Amigos Hospital. And it met its demise sometime within my lifetime.
Yeah.
And I wondered why.
I have no idea.
And to my knowledge, that was the only county farm. There may have been others.
Where was that at?
Rancho Los Amigos Hospital had a county farm.
Yeah.
They didn't have the farm. The county had the farm. Rancho was the county hospital. The patients worked the farm.
Right. The person who would know is Rachel Searles, whose blog I listed there. Rachel was she's actually the director for the agricultural extension of Los Angeles County, which which I don't know if people realize, we still actually have an agricultural extension in LA. But she's there and she is